questions. I now pass on a few questions. Speakers. Would you have some relevant questions? And
so, sir, I've just clubbed the questions, observations, and these are open for all panelists to respond to. So first was from Mr. Amrut and Ms. Vandana with regard to slums with narrow approach road and slum households which don't have any entitlement. How do we provide for them? So Ms. Tara did mention about connections and pipelines being above the ground. Ms. Natasha brought out some suggestions. And Mathisa also spoke in detail about how they are taking this up. But if any of the panelists would like to reinforce any points in response to this query.
I think Mathisa is the best person to answer. Over to you, sir.
So, in fact, when we started discussing about providing pipe water supply in the slum, the opposition came from the municipal functionaries and the PHO, stating that it is an encroachment. So it's a public land or forest land, how can we give? So that was the reason to oppose for laying road, providing water supply, providing street lighting. So my argument was that today, if you have COVID, if you have to move the ambulance or if there is a fire in the slum, will your fire tender go or not? If there is an epidemic, if there is a jaundice, if there are some accidents, some death, your ambulance will go to that house or not? Will go inside or not? Or will you say that it is an encroachment, we will not touch? Will the police, if there is a criminal case, will the police will enter into that area or not? Will you say that it is an encroachment, we cannot go? So when you want to go, you will go. When they want infrastructure facilities, you will say that it's a government land or encroachment or forest land. So for providing this to enable, my argument was that to enable an ambulance to reach, to enable a fire tender to reach, to enable a police vehicle to reach, we need to lay the road. We need to give the street lighting. Once you have the road is the carrier for the pipeline. So all our pipelines travel in the road only. That is the right of way. You don't need separate land for it. So that is how we started providing infrastructure in the slum areas. So that is because of the realization that the slums are the backbones of the cities. They built the city. All the roads were built by them. All the buildings were built by them. All infrastructures came because of the slum dwellers. From where you got to the workers, skilled, unskilled, semi-skilled, all came from the slum. We should have provided housing. We have not provided housing. That's the reason that they have put up their own housing. So that was the argument we started, and then we could succeed. There is no opposition.
Excellent. Thank you. So the next, it was more of a comment actually from Mr. Madhusudan Reddy, who said that Telangana has implemented Mission Bhagiratha to provide water supply, but how many households are actually connected is not very clear. Mr. mentioned that reporting on project completion is much stronger than measurement of outcomes. Would you have any of the panelists have any other response to this?
So measure the outcomes, as simple as that. And that's exactly what Taraji has mentioned. I think that's a great change where incentives and investments are going to look at outcomes rather than infrastructure implementation. So I think that's the way
change is coming.
Change is coming. I think it's a matter of time that most of the future projects are going to look at outcomes rather than investment per se or projects per se.
Mr. Harshvardhan from AP had shared a leading practice saying that in Andhra Pradesh, the application process has been simplified and there's been a linkage to property tax assessment number. There were some questions in response to that, saying, is that still operational and all that? But if any of the panelists would like to respond to it, any experiences you would like to share?
I just like to direct that question to Mr. Madhuvadanan. The point you are mentioning, Mr. Madhusudan, is that you need a property tax certificate itself is a barrier. So I leave it to Mati sir. How do you respond to that?
Here the objective is to increase your property tax collection or to provide water connection. You want to use this opportunity to bring them under the tax net and then increase your revenue collection, or you want to give water connection? That's a simple question. What do you want? Is it an enabling policy measure or a prohibitive? You are only shutting the door by putting condition and additional requirements. So see, the one thing we need to understand that all the illegal, see, the moment the pipe network is laid, people will get water. If there is a pipeline in front of my house, either I get water from the stand post or the PHO grassroots level, informal worker or the outsourced employee, whoever it is, he will come in the night time and provide me an illegal connection. So if official connection is not there, unofficial connection would be there. So it is in our own interest, we need to provide the connection. We have to call them and we have to give them connection, and then we have to give them some chocolate also. Take this, but take connection. You have to incentivize. Otherwise, what will happen? At least your monthly fee will not come. You will not get the user charges. First thing is that they will puncture your public water supply pipeline. They will puncture. They will use substandard material. They will use untrained plumber and cause contamination point there. They will create a contamination point, number one. That will endanger the public safety. Number two, they will remain outside your user charges net. They will remain as an illegal connection, unauthorized connection. Since it is unauthorized, they will install a pump and then start sucking the water. And there would be a lot of leakages. They will not bother because it's not measured. It is an unofficial. So it will lead to a lot of wastages, losses, irresponsible usage. It is in our own interest that we should bring them under the official net. That's the reason we should break all the barrier and give them connection. It is beneficial. Financially, it is beneficial.
Thank you, sir. Very strong and very clear message.
Only I have one question,
yes,
which is directed to Dr. Richard Francis. Many of participants are engineers, and they don't like cutting the roads, because the minute road is cut, it is a potential nuisance. The water will seep in and it damages the whole place. And laying the road is always there is always a time lag, creating a lot of problems. Now globally, there are a lot of changes that have come in terms of road drilling activity, particularly oil and gas industry. Even in India, they do a lot of innovative ways of road cutting. Is there any way, would you like to share some thoughts on how do I avoid road cutting but still put a pipe under the ground? As much as
well, I know you know the answer because we had this conversation offline. But I asked you the question, is India using directional drilling to get water pipes under concrete roads to stop the cost of road cutting? And I had shared earlier the slide of the variations of cost because of a reinstatement of roads in UK connections. It was changing whether it was in grass verge or footpath or road. And if you simply have a cheap directional drilling machine, which works so efficiently, so cheaply, it happens on the road outside here when somebody had a new connection to their horse trough for their field. The water company came along, just drilled underneath, normal stuff. And I saw in Bhubaneswar, in my last visit there, the gas company going along the side of a road, not cutting through people's concrete driveways, just directional drilling all the way through. Is the water sector using that? If not, why not?
Yeah, thank you. So my next question again is directed to Dr. Richard. Actually, one of the participants here, Mr. Chanchal, is from WaterAid. I don't see him in the list. He may have dropped out. He mentioned about a good practice from Uganda regarding prepaid meter-based public posts. I was wondering if you would have any information and if you could just share with the participants on that.
If it worked, I shared a slide showing a prepaid meter. I think it was from Kenya rather than Uganda, but the same system. And customers really like them. They really like being able to control their spending. They pay for a token, a little bit at a time. They get water out of the standpost. And so customers really like them. The cost of them and the cost of maintaining them is high. And that's why I try and look for this analog prepaid approach on a meter. But they work. I am not recommending them because you are trapping people in an old way of doing it. When we now know, and Odisha has shown so wonderfully, you can just do it straight and get the water to each individual household. So I think, although it looks a very modern technology, it's actually an outdated transitional approach, and we can do better. And I have seen India is doing better.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. We had several questions from Colonel Naresh here. One, of course, he was recommending for very strong IEC activity to bring discipline among citizens and to be able to sustain any interventions taken by a town. But he has two specific questions which are yet to be answered. One is this impact of peripheral growth and how does the city extend the services when it has planned for. Professor Chari mentioned it should take, master plan should take care of it, but if there are any further responses. And then one specific question he has for Mr. Mati is his views on water mafia, and does it exist and how do we handle it? Any thoughts on that?
I gave my reply there itself, that I laughed and said that you should ask water mafia what they do, how they have dealt with me. The water is, the more it is scarce, more business, more money. So on saturation mode, once you are determined on a mission mode, they also see it, and then so they will shift business. They'll find out some other remunerative one. So otherwise, doing this is not possible.
So
just on the point of, I just like to reflect on what Colonel Naresh said, and I will directly to some of other panelists also. As the city expands, the growth is always faster than the way water sector responds. And if you have a policy of universal connection, individual tap connection as a right, how do we cope with it? Because cities are expanded at an exponential growth. Water sector investments are not always keeping pace with that growth. So will it create any disparity in the peripheral areas versus core area? That was, what he's trying to hint. Richard or Mati sir, anybody?
Sir, I didn't get you.
So the point is, sir, is the peripheral areas are growing at a very rapid
pace. Right.
Network investments are not really keeping pace with this growth. So when you have right to water tap, how do we deal with that situation?
See, whether it is urban area or rural area, you need to provide water. That's the duty of the government. It's a welfare state. So how does it matter whether they are at this side of the urban local body or the other side of the urban local body? The city would continue to grow. So the only thing is that if it is far away from your main habitation, from your main source, then taking the network may not be very, feasible. It may be very expensive. So you may go for a production well there and a localized network there. That may be cost effective. But nevertheless, the tap water should be given. That is what we do for rural area. That we should do for peri-urban also.
So a decentralized source augmentation and network in a localized way is the most.
That's the solution. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, Dr. Mali?
Yeah, so Mr. Gopal Krishnan, are you able to unmute yourself? He wanted to share a leading practice from Coimbatore, and I thought it would be interesting for all of us to listen in. Mr. Gopal Krishnan, are you there and are you able to unmute? Yeah.
Good evening, Gopal Krishnan from Coimbatore. We are implementing a 24/7 water supply project under PPP mode. As part of the concession agreement, cost of the water house service connections, the service pipe, meter, everything is included in the project cost. The consumer has to pay only the deposit as per the corporation water supply bylaws. The cost of connection, including road cutting, service, pipe cost, meter cost, labor, everything is borne by the concessionaire as part of the project cost. Just I wanted to highlight that.
Thank you, Mr. Gopal Krishnan. How much is the deposit as per the bylaws?
4,000.
Is it for urban poor or everybody pays 4,000?
It's really, there is no poor or rich differentiation, uniform. And
So-
this bylaw is in existence from 2013. It's not a new one.
It's not a new one. So Natasha ji, this is the time you need to step in. 4,000 can be sometimes challenging as a one-time payment for urban poor. Do you have any nice project to help them to access pay this 4,000 rupees to the private operator or to the municipality to get connection? Are there any microfinance products available in the market?
So there are two ways to look at this, Dr. Chari. One is a microfinance product, which is effectively something that eventually has to be paid back as well. The other is a grant around CSR, so getting corporates or other private sector entities involved. Given that this is an urban space, the potential to get either of these two is fairly possible, right? It's the rural areas where we normally have a problem getting additional financing. But as far as it's an urban space, either of these two options is possible. I would not go for the microfinance, primarily because payment, when it comes to paying back, it becomes an additional burden on the individual, right? Because you have to take the credit on yourself. First of all, banks will not give it because you don't have a credit worthiness. So effectively, you have to build it through an MSME, or you have to have a NGO who is willing to give it to you. So there are all these particular areas that need to come in. But the CSR route is very doable. If we find the right corporates, and this is what we have now started to experiment with across various states, find the corporates working in those areas, work with them towards building the communities that surround them. So I don't know about this particular Coimbatore experience. It's interesting to note that they have actually got this 4,000 deposit. But what I would urge them to do is to actually look at this as a viable option. It is more sustainable going forward. If the fixed cost is paid, the corporate also gets to invest its CSR funds in a meaningful way. It gets a tick off from their own board with regards to their expenditure, and doesn't have to put that money back into a central fund, which we all know is there, but it's not the right way to do things, right?
Mr. Gopal Krishnan also had one more interesting angle, that property tax assessment is mandatory to get water connection in Coimbatore. I think you need to work on this, Mr. Gopal Krishnan, taking inspiration from Orissa and other places.
Yes, sir.
I think the real thing is that we should help Mr. Gopal Krishnan by taking this up at the center. So if Ms. Tara was here, I would actually urge her to look at this whole documentation issue, because every state has it. And, it's something that we really need to tackle from the center, for the center to make it mandatory. I don't know whether it is possible, but I do think that is the right way to go. Sorry, Mr. Gopal Krishnan.
We have compiled practically for all the states about
Yes.
documentation issue. I didn't want to embarrass myself or other partners. There are quite a few weird documentation
Absolutely.
documents, which I think which can be very, very regressive for everybody, even not only the poor, for even middle class to produce such documentation. I think Taraji, we will submit a concept note of how to ease the documentation, which can be embedded in the national guidelines. Thank you. Dr. Malini, over to you.
So, President Chari, this is the last point from my side, and this is directed to you. This was from Ms. Sophia. Unfortunately, she's not there. She seems to have dropped out. So her question was that how can we, as members of the Change Management Forum, how can we connect the various aspects such as rainwater harvesting structures, RO with wastewater systems? How can we take all these approaches and promote a holistic approach, a habitat approach, and how can this platform enable that? I thought it was a relevant question, and the last amongst the questions, if you could just.
No, I think it's a very valid question. In a way, in my view, this is already addressed in the presentation of Taraji, as well as Natasha ji also mentioned about it. It's something called City Water Balance Plan, which looks at a combination of sources available within the jurisdiction in a regional approach, not just a municipal boundary, but a regional approach. To combine resources available above the ground, below the ground. It could be rainwater or it could be surface water. And then we need to look at it in a conjunctive use of water rather than going further and further and further away, because the marginal cost of bringing water from distances away from the city is going to increase. For example, Bangalore brings 200 kilometers away, Hyderabad brings 200 kilometers away, from 212 kilometers away to feed us, to feed the water in the city of Hyderabad. And this cannot work in the long run, because the cost of sourcing water is going to be very, very expensive. And the power cost is going to be very expensive if you have a multi-stage pumping. So given that, the water balance plan promoted by Government of India is a very, very right entry point to start re-looking at water resource management in a conjunctive use manner. And her point about looking at rainwater, surface water, and decentralized water source management is a way forward. I think the city water balance plan is actually trying to do it. And how far we bring that approach, an integrated approach in a real life context, is something we need to look at. Probably Mr. Mathivathanan should set an example of a good practice in terms of a real city water balance plan, how it looks like in a real life practical context. Theoretically, it has been discussed for the last 20 years in academics, but in operationalizing in India, unlike in Amsterdam, unlike in other places, in Indian context, as I think we ignored nearby resources and we kept going for sources away and away from the city. I think this is one area. She made a very valid point, Dr. Malini, I think we need to work on.
Yeah. And although in our session plan today, we were to spend half an hour on developing an action plan, actions that we could take at the state level and city level. This is to Mr. Krishna Mohan, who has just placed a comment. So apologies, Mr. Mohan. I think we will reconvene for just a participant session where we can all discuss and develop. Cities who are looking at developing plans, we will plan a session. But before I close, Mr. Chari, one more point. Can you please share a little bit about what the next webinar would cover? When we say innovations, what type of innovations and what are we planning? If you could just share a little bit on that.
No, I think it's very simple. As Karama mentioned about it, and Natasha ji also indicated, there are very, very practical solutions available on the ground in India and outside also. We need to collate them. We need to bring into a common platform and curate them in a real life situation. And, as we know, we have been interacting with a lot of startups. We are interacting with innovators. It's time that we need to create a platform for them to work with the cities, to work with the water utilities, to work with the communities. Some of the business models Natasha ji has shared can be operationalized through these innovators. And that's going to be the conversation for the next event. It's not going to be the practitioners all the time. It is the innovators who are going to speak, and practitioners will listen to what are the stories and what are the interesting ideas that they have. So we are going to reverse the conversation next time, wherein the city practitioners, state level practitioners can absorb and see how these innovations can be contextualized in a real life situation. That's the conversation, Dr. Malini, we are going to have in the next round, next month. Every month we will have one.
Thank you, Professor Chari. My last task to you is to please close the program by thanking all the panelists and all.
No, I just like, it is their program, so we just facilitated, we heard, at least personally, I got inspired listening to all of them. Thank you very much. And so many people staying back beyond the period after 2 hours is something demonstrates the interest that our panelists have created during this. And thank you very much, Dr. Richard, Natasha ji, and of course, Mati sir for staying for so long. And thank you very much, ji. I think she got a call from the secretary, so she couldn't stay for a period, but she conveyed that she's deeply interested in knowing some of these good practices so that it can be embedded in Amrut 2.0. So thank you once again, all of you, for staying, and then see you next month.
Thank you very much. And we are here also joined by Ms. Preeti, who is helping us in putting the proceedings together. We are a little delayed in getting the first events proceeding, but we will ensure we get both of these to you within the next 10 days. So thank you very much, and we look forward to connecting with you again. Thank you.